Cult Girls is based on true events, telling the story of Talia and her friends as they struggle with growing suspicions that their faith is a patriarchal religious cult. It's a story of tremendous courage and female empowerment as Talia and her friends successfully free themselves. It's a story told through a feminist lens with cautionary humour. Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's miniseries. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast. And for this instalment, I am talking with former Jehovah's Witness turned activist and author Natalie Grand. The intro was the premise for Natalie's recently published and award-winning graphic novel titled Cult Girls. One review of this book reads, Natalie Grand shares a painful side of her life to encourage other women to take control of their own lives. Having gone through a similar painful experience, I know it takes great strength to hold up your head and keep moving forward. Sadly, Cult Girls is a reality for many women, but writing a new story is not impossible. I could not put this down. I laughed, sometimes cringed, and appreciated the author's vulnerability to share her story. A big thank you and welcome to Kay and Sammy, newest patrons and supporters of the show. I am grateful you are here and I appreciate you signing up to the exclusive content. For ad-free early access to full-length episodes, please consider supporting the show at patreon.com/thecultvault. And now, here is Natalie. So hello, Natalie, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to come and chat with me at length about your experiences growing up in the Jehovah's Witnesses and the incredible activism work that you have been a part of since your escape, which does include the publication of the incredible graphic novel Cult Girls, which I was very lucky to be given a copy of. Thank you very much. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Yes, my name is Natalie Grand. I'm here in California, and I just released the first time ever a graphic novel that's full color based on a true story for women about the Jehovah's Witness cult. And it's actually one of the largest international cults, so it's being appreciated by women around the world.
The caveat of the graphic novel being directed towards women is quite significant when you consider the status of women within the organization itself. Is that something that you decided early on in this project that you were going to be focusing on?
No, but I've noticed as a kid, I had a lot of feelings and frustrations that I knew women were treated differently. And, but when your family's in it and that's all you've been exposed to, I gave it my all. But it was actually reading a lot of books and being on a journey after I got out that I would have appreciated a lighter material like this that was more fun and hopeful instead of kind of a depressing story. So I felt like we needed something a little more young and fun. And I love stories, even when I'm watching Netflix or something that tell like maybe about an Amish girl or that has like maybe a different part of a country. So I thought a story that has a backdrop that's true, where you're kind of learning about a different religion or a culture. Those were the type of topics I loved.
And it's an incredible read. I absolutely loved going through Cult Girls. It is so colorful, as you said. The actual artwork itself is amazing. It's incredibly stylized, and I do highly recommend all of the listeners go and look for a copy of Cult Girls. I'll make sure that I put a link in the episode description. And the Jehovah's Witnesses, this is a church organization that you were born into.
Yes. I'm probably around third to fourth generation on both sides. Most of my cousins are in it. Even if they're not really practicing, they're not being open. Like they don't celebrate holidays, or they're calling it something else, or they're living what they would call like an immoral life, but they're disguising it. So they're not really being authentic. So I'm one of the very few people in my family that are being authentic and actually like just embrace being worldly, and I'm proud. And part of that is because I really feel passionate that I hope others are encouraged. And the more that we build this social awareness, people won't be afraid of their own shadow when they leave or suffer a lot of guilt and shame, which is really, really common in cultures like this.
With you being a third slash fourth gen member of the Jehovah's Witnesses. The family members that are involved in the church, did you all attend the same Kingdom Hall, or do you have family dotted around who would attend various different congregations?
I've been to congregations all over. Both my families, their families are in it. My grandfather was an elder even. And so when you're dating in a culture like that, you're only dating in your own organization. So it's really common, no matter what part of the world. You may go to, like on Christmas Day, they go to a snowboarding event and people fly all over because they don't celebrate Christmas, but singles are meeting each other, or there's a lot of like, or they're having their international or district conventions, which are all over the world, like at stadiums. And there's like a section that young people meet, or a lot of people are organizing and feeling like it's like arranged marriages. We have some funny stories people have come out with that their parents were trying to arrange like a marriage. So it's one of those types of culture. You're only allowed to look in your box. So that was my family. They came together in San Diego and married each other, but my parents are divorced in it. They've been divorced multiple times. So, and same thing with the leaders that founded this organization. But when I went to get a divorce and it was a mutual divorce, man, they're acting like you're worse than a pedophile. So it's like these funny little things. And it's like, yeah, but Charles Taze Russell, he got a divorce. So did Rutherford. They have lots of accusations by their wives. They weren't really the best husbands. And so, but it's okay for them. I guess, the God needed them because of their money or their power and created this. So it's like you sort of see things and it's like, that's really hurtful that you're painting me this way. But yet the foundation of this church, those leaders were doing, these sins. So, yeah.
When you say it was a mutual divorce, is that in terms of if your husband would have wanted to divorce you, then there wouldn't have been as much of a negative light put on you as an individual? Because men tend to get away with a lot more in these types of high demand religious groups than women do a lot of the time.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Growing up in it, men got away with a lot more. They got like shorter sentences. Their crimes of, maybe it was infidelity. It's even written in their elder secret flock book, which is a secret society within the organization, that if, let's say, one of the leaders did have an affair or something and it was covered for a period of time, and people didn't know about it, that it would be forgiven because they would think that Jehovah maybe secretly approved this eldership. Now, when they approve an elder, anybody for leadership, including a ministerial servant, if Jehovah's Witnesses are listening, it goes to the branch of that area and they supposedly pray on it. So these are God enlightened men. And that's important to know because when a lot of these court cases are coming out about the leaders, we were told when we were young that these leaders that are in our church and the higher that they are on different levels, that these were God's anointed people. And so that is kind of like, you see that like with stars, whether it's like Michael Jackson or something, these kids, it puts them in a vulnerable state because they're putting them on a different pedestal than maybe like their teacher or something, because this is somebody that God trusted and they prayed on this man. So he must be really good because he was approved. And so that's kind of the theory with these things. Yeah. So if the elder can, he can have infidelity, but if it wasn't manifested and known to the congregation, it is forgiven. And a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses don't know that that's in their own literature and their secret books. And all that stuff's public in some of these websites of libraries. People have the books, or elders that left, you're supposed to give your elder, if you lost your eldership, you give the secret book back, but a lot of them have kept them. And so like people that are like drinking the Kool-Aid, they would say that's not true, but it's absolutely true. It's in the book. And so, but these are policies they don't show to the people. So then when a woman, maybe I didn't do those things, but let's say a woman did, they would come down and say that she should be stoned and she's all these terrible things, and they could judge her. And so some of this stuff just isn't fair, and there's no women representation. They have their own, they're one of the few cults that have like their own version of a court system. And their court system supersedes the government. And so that's why we're having all these court cases come out around the world and pressure put on them, because they do like a court case. They set up like a judicial thing, because one of the original founders, which was Rutherford, he was an attorney. So he implemented some judicial case, and he created the disfellowshipment arrangement, which was kind of a little copycat of the Catholic Church. But I think it's a lot more extreme than what the Catholic Church used to do. And so if they handle something in-house, like let's say there's child pornography or something, or they don't let the law know, or voyeurism, which is covered in my book lightly. But these are things that I've seen and my friends have gone through, and those are crimes here in the United States, but they're not crimes inside the organization. And even in their literature, there's not a crime against child pornography too. So to them, like, you may be an elder, or maybe just some random brother that's going out in service door to door and knocking on people's doors or working with your child. He could be viewing children and they know about it. There was a recent thing that this brother, an elder, was at TJ Maxx, and he was viewing girls, and somebody put it on public media because the locals were shocked and horrified, and somebody identified him as one of their elders and said, look, this network is showing this guy that he was accused, and technically that's an accusation, so he shouldn't really be serving just for having accusation of something so serious. But see, that isn't a crime. A crime is like physical contact, and so child pornography to them is not really a crime. And so when my friends would say, oh, I got voyeured by this person, they would say, well, that's not really a crime. There's nothing we can do about that because there was no sexual contact. So some of these things are not right, but they're very wrong in the world. So they're important to point out for people that are joining an organization like this, I think.
Absolutely. And the thing you mentioned about those coming door to door, you think that when people are trying to spread the word of God or spread their religious teachings, which they've been brought up to believe are there to help people be saved, there to help people become spiritually pure. And yet we don't know who these people are. It's coming out now that they really could be any type of predator. And I think that that's important to note.
It's the foundation of why they're called Jehovah's Witnesses, because you have to go out in service and preach the word. That is a requirement. In fact, one of their governing body members, which is the 8 men that rule the whole worldly organization, which the Mormons are structurized the same too. They have a governing body. So those are the enlightened men by God. They're the channel of God. And so one of them recently came out. They do public broadcasting because they've moved into that sort of religion. And he was saying that if you went out and on a vacation for 2 weeks, he used the word 2 weeks, and you weren't out in field service, you might lose your salvation. And to me, I thought that's like so nuts. You would invest like decades of your life, all this stuff, raise your family in it. And because you didn't go out in service for 2 weeks, and like a lot of people, they'd go on vacation, they have to go out in service. So this recruiting process is part of being what is called a Jehovah's Witness. That's why they call them that. And so let's say you're a pedophile. They are in like prisons, which I think is wonderful. Like, preach the word, let people find God and stuff, or do some kind of reformation. But a lot of the predators that are in it, these victims don't get justice. It's not known to the people. If they're forgiven, you're not supposed to talk about it, even if it's true, but it is required that they go door to door. And so that's where they get access to people. They may have a Bible study. They may be there's a trust, like, oh, they show this literature of working with the young, with the old. They're socializing. Your socialization growing up is not, you're not just hanging out with teenagers, you're hanging out with like 40, 50-year-old men or women, and your trust is down. It's about encompassing all the ages. And so, yeah, absolutely. They will have history, and they may have criminal, maybe hidden things or things that were criminal, but we are not to talk about it because it's gossip, and they're forcing these kids together, and their boundaries are down. So yeah, there is criminals, previous criminals knocking on your door because they're forgiven. They've been forgiven. So there's no warning. And to me, if I had a structure like that, I wouldn't make those people go out in service, or I would, but they're making them, so they have to. So that means they are knocking on your door. Absolutely.
It's not really something that I'd considered before, despite the numerous conversations that we've been privileged to have on the show so far. Going into prisons to recruit individuals who are expected, in order to remain part of the organization, to go out themselves door to door when they're free from incarceration and able to do so. Not all of those people with criminal records are going to rehabilitate, and some are going to reoffend, and some are going to have predatory natures. But under the organization, will have to go door to door, which is really something when you think about it. And what you said around the elders of each kingdom hall being supposed enlightened or chosen individuals put into those positions because they've been elected in one way or another, it gives them a certain pedestal, but it creates a vacuum of fear, because these are the individuals who make the decision on whether you will get to stay or not, sometimes, in terms of disfellowshipping. So there's the pedestal, but there's also the element of fear, which of course we understand is a way to control large groups of people when you are the minority at the top of the pyramid of control.
Yeah. And think about it. It's hard to think like a criminal, but if you were a criminal that wanted access to children, which organization would be the easiest target? And it would be this one, because even if they knew of something and the elders forgave on you and said you were forgiven, your sin would be covered, and you would have access to, even if you weren't an elder or anything, you would still have access to all these multiple meetings and out in field service. And these kids are being taught to open their heart to this is your spiritual family, and your spiritual family supersedes your physical family. Like if your aunts and uncles are not Jehovah's Witnesses, these are your grandma and grandpas here. And they do take that role. And there's layers to this, why these children are vulnerable. And I mean, I witnessed this because they are isolated from the world. And that's why I'm building the awareness, any teacher, medical, even though I'm not in it, I'm still actively telling people that have access to children how they think, and they have shock on their face because they're thinking, how is this really happening in America? And because this organization doesn't change, but these children are not allowed to hang out with kids in their neighborhood. They're watching videos and publications like, don't get close to your neighbors because they're going to die. The only reason you would be friends with your neighborhood friends would be like if you were to recruit them. Like I would bring, literature in my backpack or tell kids. I'm a little bit more of an extrovert, but those kids are dying, and they could, they're always saying the bad association will ruin your everlasting life. These kids are going to die, and Armageddon's coming tomorrow. And these kids are not allowed to be in extracurricular sports, anything that involves association with the world. And plus that's competitive. And then academics aren't encouraged either, because these kids aren't going to graduate because Armageddon's coming. That's selfish to work on their academia, because that's being a worldly person. I mean, there's this article, you're just beaten on this stuff that secular people, that's worldly and selfish. But really, when I left, those those Jehovah's Witnesses are seeing those people for their cancer or certain problems. They're using engineers. They sure like the technology that they provide. They're using their airplanes and stuff. So it's like, once I started to really see how the world worked, I was like, I want to live with these people that are constantly learning, and they work together in a team. And so that's kind of discussed in the book. I mean, I put these out in silly scenarios because you can't talk about these things as a kid. And now that my girlfriends are older and they've left and made changes in their family, they said that the things that they saw in the book, they thought too, but they never could talk about it. Like, they didn't like that the boys got to do certain things when they were young. And they're like, did you write my story? And I said, no, that was my own story. But the sad part is we weren't allowed to talk about it as friends. And, children in the world today, they could talk about that. Like, I've had friends that are of different cultures, and their parents are trying to for instance, let their kids, like if they have a son or a daughter, they try really hard to make them do equal chores, because in some cultures a long time ago, the girls had to do more chores. And so there's like a conscious awareness. And but these Jehovah's Witness kids don't get that kind of awareness growing up. They don't get to be authentic or talk about women's rights and stuff.
One thing that's been quite interesting for me throughout the conversations that I've been able to do with former Jehovah's Witnesses is that each person so far that I've spoken with has attended public school, no matter which part of the world they've been from when I've spoken to them. So there doesn't seem to be as much of a focus on the homeschooling element within the organization like there might be in some other high demand religious groups. But this, of course, comes with its own issues of, as you mentioned, schools celebrating things like Christmas, which of course is not something that children as Jehovah's Witnesses would do in a school setting or anywhere at all.
Actually, yeah, a lot of the Jehovah's Witnesses are on homeschool. My brother was on homeschool. Most of my girlfriends did not get a high school diploma. They were on homeschool. I went to an unaccredited Jehovah's Witness ran school. There was a couple in the area. And I did not know that it was unaccredited. My parents paid for it, and it was a crappy education that I had to redo. I didn't really learn anything. So they were kind of more victims in it. But we go to conventions. It's mandatory. Our vacation time as a family, we were poor. And most families, their summer vacation, it's all about this 4-day, at the time, it was a 4-day convention at maybe one of our stadiums we would travel to. And it would be many parts on young people up there in college. And this is in my book, like all these subjects are covered in the book. And there would be like a lady up there said, oh, I almost got this music career. And, or they were really smart and got a scholarship to Harvard or something. I mean, this is every single convention. And they said we turned it down to serve full-time the ministry because the end is coming, and I love people so much. I'm doing God's work. I'm saving people. And so this was the message we got constantly. And then, and then a distrust of that if you did go to college, you would have worldly wisdom put in you. There was fear. Yeah, there absolutely was fear put in it. And then some elders I have posted before, they lost their privilege of being an elder because their daughter went to college. And that one is circulated. And there is, like, if you were a leader and you endorsed that your kid went to college, you would certainly not be allowed to talk about it, but you could lose your thing, especially like maybe, I mean, in this case, this elder, the daughter didn't live at home because she went away to college. So I doubt she didn't live at home, but he got removed. And if your child is living at home, you would have like a target on your back. People would wonder why your household is not in control. Like, you can't be an elder and have your children doing worldly things. Like they can't be competing in soccer or something. Whereas like maybe a family that doesn't have a leadership, their child may be in a sport, but you can't talk about it. And people are talking bad about them. And there is marking talks in the hall saying, be careful of the people, even inside the King Hall. So your neighbor could ruin your everlasting life. But then inside the Kingdom Hall, there's like these very judgmental comments, and there's like little groups inside. And so that's why you're always screening what you say. You can't talk bad about an elder or something, because one little gossip thing could spark. And then they're like, oh, Natalie has a bad attitude. Be very careful. She's wanting to, pursue a career, or she talked about that elder. We got to be really, really careful. And then you're not invited to things, and then your kids aren't invited to things. And then it's just a lonely world because you're not you're not allowed to hang out with the school kids. So it's like a really weird, stifling culture.
It's interesting about the homeschooling aspect. Do you think that that's because of the amount of time that your family's been involved in the organization that you would be put on homeschooling, or is it something that is more prevalent for Jehovah's Witnesses in the area that you live?
It's because there's not a focus on working on yourself. Like even going to the gym, they have talks about owning a boat or going on vacation. So everything, if you really look at the bottom line, they are so afraid at the very top level that you wouldn't be giving back to the organization. And not only does that include field service, they may want your construction time. They want your kids maybe to be on a regional project. And so there's no emphasis on education. And it is a hamster wheel. You have multiple meetings a week, and they give talks, and they full on say from the very top, it's in their publication, that school, the meetings come before school. And then you also need to take your family out in field service on Saturday. And then a lot of people that, they're not really, the only people that kind of have money in the organization are the ones that have their own business. And sometimes they even have like deals with other witnesses. So I'm not going to say that they're all poor. We were poor. So also, like a lot of us when we were young, and I put that in there, we're paying rent at a very young age. And I've seen other cultures, like my nail lady, she came from Vietnam, and she's just working like 50, 60 hours a week. She said she would finance her house for her kids to like go to college. That's how passionate. I never saw anybody like that on a poverty level in the organization. So you can't even say that it's poverty. So it was a religious thing, because I've seen a lot of poverty people really pull their kids out and invest in their kids, where even the whole family, I knew another family, they were all making payments so this son could pursue med school, and their family like mowed lawns, and they were from another country. And I thought, wow, I was kind of blaming the education thing on poverty, but it wasn't. They had the same Jehovah's Witnesses have the same opportunity as some of these immigrants, and they're figuring out how to get their children to be really successful and like build some kind of empire for their future, tree.
When you were growing up within the organization, were you restricted with some of the hallmarks of high demand religious groups that we see typically across various groups? We've spoken about your education, but were you expected to dress a certain way? Were you restricted with relationships with individuals inside the organization and outside? I know you've already touched on being told very early on to stay away from school kids and neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, I can spot Jehovah's Witnesses pretty easy. They're a little close to Mormon, but they look slightly closer. But yeah, I mean, there was that, but it wasn't like radical clothing. We're just supposed to be modest. And, I did tell, like in high school, somebody wants to invite you to a dance or a boy, and it's like, no, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I only date I followed the program. I mean, I told them the truth, and they looked at you like you're crazy. But the thing is that, and different kids have different experiences. So like, I really believed it when I was young that we all categorize it different. I thought Jehovah loved me so much that I'm a rose-colored person. So I thought, I'm the lucky kid. So I'm taking this not great childhood and thinking, I must be special that I got all this treatment and that I don't have nobody ask me what my dreams are, because Jehovah loves me. He wants me to be in paradise, and I'm here to be these kids' teachers and stuff. So you kind of think that maybe you're special, or some kids, they just go, like my daughter, when she was in school, it created more mental anxiety. She kind of retreated because she really wanted to be like these kids, or she liked certain things. And I was saying no, and she wanted to do holidays and stuff. And I was like, absolutely not. That's, this. So everybody kind of has a different experience, but that's how the kids are coping. They're coping in these ways when they're young.
The things that you've mentioned around finding hidden policies and information that is purposefully kept away from the typical members of the Jehovah's Witnesses, were you privy to any of this information at any point when you were inside the organization, or is this all stuff that you've managed to find out researching since you've left?
I knew a lot of this stuff growing up because my mom, she saw things, and she was trying her best to mentally prepare me, I think, at a young age, even though she likes that religion and stuff. But I would ask certain questions. I remember even asking my grandma, like, why is it like this for a woman? And they said, you need to accept that's your place. And kind of like it's a privilege. Or I was like, I want to go live in the city. I want to be a corporate person. I want to make money, or, I want to do those things. Like, to me, marriage and having kids, I didn't even want kids because I didn't have really a great childhood. So, but they're like, oh, you'll want it when you get older. And they're like, that's not a Christian place for a woman. But I was like, if a man does it, it's a little more acceptable. And they have a different set of pressures. Some of the men raised in that culture, because their fate could be the provider. So it's like these really 1950s cultures. So I kind of knew that there was these things. Like, I heard, like, there was this lady that was 90 years old or something. And the ladies in the hall told a story. She was a very kind woman that had got a divorce, and her ex-husband, she was fine with the divorce. He wasn't a Jehovah's Witness, and I think he was maybe like homeless or something. He was down and out, and she let him stay the night at her house. It was like her father's. She had kids, and she let him sleep on the couch. Now, that doesn't mean she had any kind of relations with him, but somebody told on her, and she was an honest woman and said, yes, he did sleep on my couch, and I'm not going to let the father of my children sleep on the street or whatever. And she got disfellowshipped. And so she paid a very heavy price. Maybe, women could be out for 2 years. And that means you're sitting at the back of the Kingdom Hall. If your children were older, they would not be allowed to hang. You wouldn't see the birth of their children. Very severe shunning. You may be at the grocery store. I've been treated that way. They won't serve you. Now, maybe they know not to do that because it could cause the store a lawsuit or something. But these are the things these women are going to. So she never did anything. So we know these things growing up. So you learn not to have a target on your back. So my mother did tell me, like, just be very careful what you say about an elder, because they could say that you're being a divisive spirit. And that alone, you get 2 witnesses that said that you were talking bad about one of the elders, you are out. Apostasy would be one book. It could be reading Cult Girls. You got caught reading Cult Girls. That's apostasy. That is worse. You're up there with a murderer. But then other times, other people commit apostasy. They may read some of these articles, or Crisis of a Conscience is a real popular ex-Jehovah's Witness expose book. And somebody tells on them, and then the elders are like, oh, he's struggling. We're going to have him to coffee. So and I saw these things. So there's a very strong inconsistency. So basically, these elders, the 3 men, are picking and choosing who's out. It could be Sally has a cigarette. This person may have an affair 10 times, this man, but you know what? He was sorry. He was sorry, heartfelt sorry. He was down and out. But this teenager that smoked a cigarette, they're going to get 2 years out. And, a young person is not mentally equipped for this. I saw it all the time. Some have committed suicide after a disfellowshipment because they're not allowed to live with the world. They didn't really pursue financial academics. So, and then they're mentally struggling and they can't afford to live in their own place. And then their family may not allow them home to live there because they're an elder, and you can't have a disfellowship person living at home as a child. So there is some lost kids that do kind of go homeless in a sense, even as a minor. Or they don't feel welcome. My friend said that her parents were like, you have to be in your room when we have certain people over. And so she couldn't come down for dinner if certain people were in her house. And they tell you not to have dinner with your kids if they're disfellowship. Both me and my brother were disfellowshipped as teenagers. And so we, our family might've had dinner, but in another house, they serve their dinner in their room to them. So, this is just kind of the day in a life.
You were reinstated after a certain amount of time, is that right? You did continue your tenure within the Jehovah's Witnesses after this first disfellowshipping.
Yes, and it's very difficult to get reinstated. They are looking for work. So when you get reinstated, they like to tell you it's a few months, but I was disfellowshipped as a teen and it took 2 years. And you can cry. My grandpa coached me. He was like, make sure you cry. And you can't, and my thing, when I got disfellowshipped too, you can't say, oh, this person's like, I knew all the teenagers were all living secret lives. So I'm kind of just a little more honest. I'm thinking God is in this stuff. Like he's going to know I'm honest and he's going to forgive me. But you do have to, I put this in the book, you got to have the waterworks and stuff, but they pick and choose. And these elders are very cruel. They'll say things like could be stoned. You are ruining the spirit of the kingdom hall. They'll just call you names. You're Black Widow. They'll gossip about you when you're not in it. People always assume the worst. You could get, disfellowship for drinking and alcohol. And then people are, saying these things and you're not there to defend yourself. And then they're like, oh, it's a good sign if you show up for your announcement. And it just feels like these people really want to drive off a cliff after they've gone through this intense judicial meeting of scriptures and bow beating. And other churches don't do this. I personally think these judicial things should just be like a way for you to cleanse and say, hey, I did that, because just that and you're just addressing what you did, that's like a form of release. Like you just went to a therapist or something and then they're working on their thing. But this isn't like that. This is all judgment, very, very heavy. No women, there's no jury there. It's not like a fair court system that we have today.
That is the end of part 1 of this mini-series on cult girls. To find a copy of the book, please follow the link in the episode description. And to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault Podcast.